The moment I realized I was in love with my best friend. We were trapped in a cave with 3 feet of snow blocking the entrance and no way out. "We're going to die here, aren't we?" Ryan's voice cracked as he stared at the wall of white that had sealed us inside. His breath came out in visible puffs, and in the dim light of our failing flashlight, I could see the fear written across his face. The same face I'd known since we were kids, now somehow unfamiliar in its vulnerability. I wanted to tell him the truth right then, that I'd been in love with him for years, that every stupid camping trip, every late-night conversation, every moment I'd spent convincing myself we were just friends had been a lie I told myself to keep him close. But instead I said, "We're not going to die. I built this place for exactly this kind of situation." He laughed, bitter and sharp. "Right. Your cave cabin that everyone said was a death trap, that my parents begged me not to visit, that your own brother called the stupidest project he'd ever seen." Ryan turned to face me fully, and even in the cold, even in the fear, my heart stuttered at the intensity of his gaze. "So forgive me, Marcus, if I'm not exactly confident right now." The way he said my name, like an accusation and a plea at the same time, made something twist in my chest. We'd been coming to this mountain together since college, but this was different. This was the first time he'd seen the cabin I'd spent 2 years carving into the mountainside, reinforcing with lumber and stone, turning into something that existed between nature and human ingenuity. Everyone had doubted it. Everyone had called me crazy. Everyone except the part of me that had built it, hopping somehow, that Ryan would see it and understand what I couldn't say out loud. 3 days earlier, the forecast had called for light snow. Ryan had driven up from the city to spend the weekend, just like he had dozens of times before. But this time was supposed to be different. This time, I was going to tell him the truth about how I felt. I'd rehearsed the words so many times they'd lost all meaning, but I'd promised myself I wouldn't let another year pass living in the space between friendship and something more. Then the storm had hit harder than anyone predicted, and suddenly we weren't thinking about feelings. We were thinking about survival. "The cabin will hold," I said, trying to sound more certain than I felt. "I've got supplies, a wood stove, enough food for 2 weeks if we're careful. The blizzard can't last forever." Ryan's jaw tightened. "That's not what I'm worried about." "Then what?" He looked away, back toward the sealed entrance, and I saw his shoulders rise and fall with a breath that seemed to carry more weight than just cold air. "Nothing. Forget it." But I couldn't forget it, because I'd seen something flash across his face in that moment, something that looked dangerously close to the same fear I'd been carrying for years. The fear of wanting something you can't have. The fear of losing someone because you wanted too much. The first night passed in tense silence. We'd built up the fire in the stone hearth I'd constructed, arranged our sleeping bags on opposite sides of the small main room, and pretended the situation was normal. Just two friends camping. Just another adventure. Nothing unusual about being trapped in a cave during what the radio, before we lost signal, had called the worst blizzard to hit the region in 30 years. Ryan had barely spoken to me since his outburst about the cabin. He'd helped gather firewood from my stockpile, had eaten the soup I'd heated up without comment, had checked his phone obsessively even though we both knew there was no signal this deep in the mountain. I wanted to ask what was wrong, but I was afraid I already knew the answer. He'd been distant for weeks before this trip, ever since I'd mentioned, casually over beers at his apartment, that I'd been on a few dates with a guy from town. Ryan had gone quiet then too, had changed the subject quickly, and something between us had shifted. I'd told myself I was imagining it, that my own feelings were making me see things that weren't there. But now, trapped in this small space with nowhere to hide, the tension was undeniable. "I'm going to check the entrance," Ryan said suddenly, standing up from where he'd been sitting by the fire. "There's no point. We'd need a shovel to get through that much snow, and even then." "I need to do something, Marcus." His voice was sharp. "I can't just sit here." I watched him move to the entrance tunnel, saw him start clawing at the packed snow with his bare hands, futile and desperate. After a moment, I went to him, grabbed his wrists gently to stop him. His hands were already red from cold and friction. "Hey, stop, you're going to hurt yourself." He yanked away from me like my touch burned. "Don't. Don't what? Just don't touch me right now, okay?" The words hit me like a physical blow. In all our years of friendship, through college and beyond, Ryan had never flinched away from me. We'd always been the kind of friends who existed in easy physical proximity, shoulder bumps, casual hugs, falling asleep on the same couch during movie marathons. This rejection felt like a door slamming shut. I stepped back, hands raised. "Fine, I'm sorry." He stood there in the tunnel, breathing hard, his back to me. The silence stretched out until I couldn't stand it anymore. "Did I do something wrong?" I asked quietly. "No," his voice was rough. "That's the problem, you never do anything wrong." Before I could ask what that meant, he pushed past me back into the main room, and I was left standing in the cold tunnel, more confused than ever. The second day brought more snow. We could hear it howling outside, could feel the temperature dropping even with the fire going. I'd built the cabin well. The walls were thick. The ventilation system I'd designed worked perfectly, keeping smoke out while retaining heat. But the psychological weight of being trapped was harder to engineer away. Ryan had retreated into himself. He sat on his sleeping bag, reading one of the paperbacks I kept stocked on a shelf carved into the stone wall, barely looking up when I moved around the cabin. I tried to give him space, but the cabin wasn't large. Maybe 400 square feet total with the main living area, a small alcove I'd turned into a storage area, and the entrance tunnel. Everything I'd built here had been built with him in mind, though I'd never admitted it. The way I'd positioned the window opening to catch the sunrise, because Ryan loved mornings. The books I'd chosen, all genres I knew he enjoyed. The careful attention to making the space feel less like a survival shelter and more like a home. I'd poured 2 years of my life into this place, and somewhere along the way, it had become a monument to feelings I'd never expressed. "I talked to Sarah before we lost signal," Ryan said suddenly, not looking up from his book. My stomach clenched. Sarah was the girl he'd been seeing casually for a few months. I'd met her once at a group dinner and she'd been nice enough. Pretty, smart, easy to talk to. Everything that made sense for Ryan to want. Everything that wasn't me. "Oh yeah, how's she doing?" "She said she loves me." The words hung in the air between us like smoke. I forced myself to keep my voice steady. That's great, man. What did you say?" He finally looked up, and his eyes were dark with something I couldn't read. "I told her I needed to think about it." "Why?" "Because I don't know if I can say it back." He closed the book slowly, deliberately. "Because every time I try to picture a future with her, something feels wrong. Like I'm play acting at a life I'm supposed to want instead of living one I actually do." My heart was hammering now. "What do you mean?" Ryan stood up, started packing the small space. "Do you ever feel like you're lying to everyone, including yourself? Like you've built this whole identity, and you're so deep into it that you don't even know if it's real anymore?" "Ryan, when you told me you were dating that guy, Ben, was it? When you told me that He stopped, ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "I wanted to be happy for you. I should have been happy for you. You're my best friend and you'd finally started being open about who you are, and I should have felt nothing but support." "But you didn't," I said quietly. He looked at me, really looked at me, and the vulnerability in his face was devastating. "No, I felt like someone had reached into my chest and squeezed, and I didn't understand why. I convinced myself it was just, I don't know, jealousy that you were moving on with your life or fear that you wouldn't have time for me anymore. But that wasn't it." The cabin felt suddenly smaller, the air thicker. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, there was only the sound of our breathing and the crackle of the fire. "Then what was it?" I asked, even though I was terrified of the answer. He took a step toward me, then another. We were close enough now that I could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could count the days of stubble on his jaw. Close enough that all the excuses I'd ever made for why we stood this close, why we gravitated toward each other, why everyone always assumed we were together until we corrected them, all of it fell away, leaving only the raw truth beneath. "I think you know," Ryan whispered. My breath caught. This was it. The moment I'd imagined 1,000 times in 1,000 different ways. And now that it was here, I found myself paralyzed by fear. Fear that I was misunderstanding. Fear that even if I wasn't, saying it out loud would change everything irreversibly. "Do I?" My voice came out rougher than intended. He reached up slowly, giving me time to move away, and brushed his fingers against my jaw. The touch was feather-light, questioning, and it sent electricity straight through my nervous system. I'd been touched by men before, brief hookups, a couple of short relationships, but nothing had ever felt like this. Like every nerve ending in my body had been waiting for this specific person, this specific moment. "I can't stop thinking about you," Ryan said, his voice low and strained. "When I'm with Sarah, I'm thinking about you. When I'm at work, I'm thinking about you. When I wake up in the morning, you're the first thing on my mind. And I don't know what that means or what I'm supposed to do about it, but being stuck here with you, pretending everything is normal, is driving me insane." I should have said something. Should have told him I felt the same way, that I'd been in love with him for years, that every moment of our friendship had been colored by this want I'd learned to hide so well I'd almost convinced myself it wasn't there. But my throat had closed up, and all I could do was stand there, feeling his hand against my face, watching his eyes search mine for something I was too afraid to give. Then the moment shattered. Ryan dropped his hand, stepped back, and the spell broke. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I shouldn't have. God, I'm sorry. Forget I said anything. We're stuck here, and I'm probably just losing it from cabin fever or something, and Ryan. No, it's fine. Really. Let's just get through this, okay? And then we can go back to normal and pretend this never happened." He turned away before I could respond, retreating back to his sleeping bag, burying himself in his book like he could read his way out of the conversation. And I was left standing there, my face still tingling where he'd touched me, my heart racing, knowing I just let the most important moment of my life slip through my fingers because I was too much of a coward to reach back. The third day was agony. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary, the unspoken words from the night before filling every silence. I tried to focus on practical things, rationing food, keeping the fire going, monitoring our water supply. But my mind kept returning to the look in Ryan's eyes, the tremor in his voice when he'd said he couldn't stop thinking about me. He'd almost kissed me. I was certain of it. In that moment before he'd pulled away, I'd seen his gaze drop to my lips, had felt the way the air between us had charged with possibility. And I'd frozen like an idiot, too trapped in my own fear to close the distance myself. Now he wouldn't look at me. We ate lunch in silence, and when our hands accidentally touched while reaching for the same water bottle, he jerked back like I'd burned him. The rejection hurt more than I wanted to admit. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to talk about last night," I said, setting down the bowl of rice I'd been pretending to eat. Ryan didn't look up from his own food. "There's nothing to talk about." "That's bullshit and you know it." "Marcus." "No." I stood up, moved to sit closer to him, not touching but near enough that he couldn't ignore me. "You can't just say what you said and then pretend it didn't happen. That's not fair to either of us." He finally met my eyes, and the pain in them made my chest ache. "What do you want me to say? That I'm confused? That I don't know what I'm feeling or what any of it means? That the idea of being attracted to my best friend terrifies me?" "How do you think I feel?" The words burst out before I could stop them. "You think this is easy for me? Watching you date Sarah, listening to you talk about her, knowing that I've been in love with you since we were 23 years old and never had the guts to say it. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the storm outside seemed to quiet, like the world was holding its breath. Ryan stared at me, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something else, something that looked almost like relief. What? I'm in love with you. My voice shook, but I forced myself to hold his gaze. I have been for years. Why do you think I built this place? Why do you think I kept inviting you up here, kept making excuses to spend time with you even when you were with other people? This entire cabin exists because I needed somewhere that was ours, even if it could never really be ours. Marcus, he said my name like a prayer and a curse. I know you're with Sarah. I know you're straight, or at least you thought you were, and I never said anything because I couldn't stand the idea of losing you completely. But you asked what I want you to say, and that's it. I want you to say something real. Even if it's just that you don't feel the same way, at least then I'll know. Ryan's hands were trembling. I watched him set down his bowl, watched him process what I'd just confessed, and prepared myself for the rejection I'd been expecting for years. But instead of pulling away, he moved closer. I don't know if I'm straight, he said quietly. I thought I was. I've only ever been with women, only ever let myself think about women. But then you came out and something shifted. I started noticing things I'd trained myself not to see. The way you laugh. The way you look at me sometimes when you think I'm not paying attention. The way my heart speeds up when you're near. He reached out, hesitant, and took my hand. His palm was warm against mine, slightly calloused, familiar and foreign at the same time. I'm terrified, Ryan continued. I'm terrified of what it means if I feel this way. I'm terrified of losing you if we try to be something more and it doesn't work. I'm terrified of spending the rest of my life wondering what if. But Marcus, when you just said you love me, I felt like I could finally breathe. My eyes were burning. Ryan, I don't know if I can say I love you back yet. Not because I don't feel it, but because I need to understand what I'm feeling first. I need to figure out who I am outside of who I thought I was supposed to be. But I know that when I'm with you, everything makes sense in a way it doesn't with anyone else. And when you mentioned dadding Ben, the reason I felt like my chest was being crushed was because I wanted to be him. I wanted to be the person who got to take you on dates and make you laugh, and everything else that comes with that. He squeezed my hand tighter. So if you're asking if I feel something for you, the answer is yes. I do. I don't know what to call it yet, but it's there and it's been there and I can't ignore it anymore. We sat like that, hands intertwined, the fire casting dancing shadows across his face. I could see every emotion playing across his features, fear and hope and desire and uncertainty all mixed together. And I realized that this was enough. For now, this was enough. Okay, I said softly. Okay. We don't have to figure everything out right now. We're trapped in a cave during a blizzard. Maybe this isn't the best time for life-altering decisions. I smiled, though my eyes were still wet. But when we get out of here, when we're back in the real world and we've both had time to think, we'll figure it out together. If you want to. Ryan's expression softened. I want to. He paused, then added, and Marcus, this cabin isn't stupid, it's amazing, you're amazing. Everyone said it was a death trap. Everyone was wrong. He looked around at the solid walls, the warm fire, the space that had kept us safe through the worst storm in 30 years. You built something that saved our lives. You built something that, he stopped, a small smile tugging at his lips. You built something that gave us a place to finally be honest with each other. The fourth day brought a subtle shift. The tension between us hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into something else, something charged with possibility rather than fear. We moved around each other more easily, let our hands brush without jerking away, allowed silences to be comfortable instead of loaded. Ryan helped me take inventory of our supplies, and our fingers lingered when they touched over the canned goods. We split the last of the coffee, and he made a joke that actually made me laugh. Small things, but they felt monumental, like we were learning a new language together, one built on honesty instead of pretense. That evening after dinner, he asked me to tell him about building the cabin. I tried to explain it before, back when I'd first started the project, but he'd been distracted then, distant in a way I now understood. This time, he listened with full attention as I described every decision, every challenge, every moment I'd stood in this cave and imagined what it could become. The entrance was the hardest part, I said, sketching invisible diagrams in the air. I needed something that would protect against weather but still allow ventilation. Took me 6 months to get the angle right. Why here? Ryan asked. Of all the places on this mountain, why this cave? I hesitated, then decided I'd already laid my heart bare. What was one more truth? Because this was where we came that first time, remember? That weekend after finals junior year, when we hiked up here with terrible equipment and no real plan. You said it was the most peaceful place you'd ever been. His eyes widened slightly. You remembered that. I remember everything about you. The words hung between us, intimate and heavy. Ryan swallowed hard and I watched his throat work with emotion. God, when had I started noticing things like that? Or maybe I'd always noticed, had just gotten good at pretending I hadn't. Come here, Ryan said softly, patting the space next to him on his sleeping bag. I moved over, sat close enough that our shoulders touched. The contact sent warmth through me that had nothing to do with the fire. We sat like that for a while, just existing in the same space, and it felt more intimate than anything we'd done before. Like we were crossing an invisible line with every breath, moving from what we'd been to what we might become. I broke up with Sarah, Ryan said eventually. Before we lost signal, I called her and ended it. My heart jumped when? The morning we got trapped, before the storm really hit. I'd been planning to do it all week, but I kept chickening out. Then I got here and I saw you and I couldn't keep lying to her, or to myself. He turned to look at me, our faces inches apart. She deserved someone who wasn't thinking about someone else every time they kissed her. Ryan, I'm still figuring things out, he said quickly. About myself, about what I want. But I know I couldn't keep pretending with her when all I wanted was to be here with you. I didn't trust myself to speak. Instead, I lifted my hand and cupped the side of his face, thumb brushing against his cheekbone. He leaned into the touch, his eyes fluttering closed for a moment, and the trust in that gesture made my chest tight. We should probably sleep, I said, though I made no move to pull away. It's late. Yeah, but he didn't move either. We stayed like that, the space between us charged with everything we'd said and everything we hadn't. I could see his pulse hammering in his throat, could feel the way his breath had quickened to match mine. If I leaned forward just a little, I could kiss him, could close the distance that had existed between us for so many years. But something held me back. Maybe it was the knowledge that Ryan was still processing, still figuring out parts of himself he'd never examined before. Maybe it was the fear that if we rushed this, we'd ruin whatever chance we had at something real. Or maybe it was just that this moment, right here, with his face in my hand and possibility stretching out before us, was enough for now. Good night, Marcus, Ryan whispered, finally pulling back. Good night. I moved back to my own sleeping bag and we lay in the darkness, the fire burning low between us. But before I drifted off, I heard his voice, soft and uncertain. Hey, Marcus. Yeah. Thank you for telling me the truth, for being patient with me while I figure this out, for everything. I smiled into the darkness, always. The fifth day we woke to silence. The howling wind that had been our constant companion for days had finally stopped. I sat up, saw Ryan doing the same, and we shared a look of cautious hope. Do you think, he started? Only one way to find out. We bundled up in our warmest layers and made our way to the entrance tunnel. The snow had compacted over the days, turning into a dense barrier, but now I could see small gaps where daylight filtered through. The blizzard had passed. It took us 2 hours of careful digging to clear the entrance enough to squeeze through. When we finally emerged into the winter sunlight, the world had been transformed into something from a fairy tale. Everything was white, pristine, untouched. The sky was impossibly blue, and the air was so cold it hurt to breathe, but it was also the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. "We made it," Ryan said, his voice full of wonder. "We made it." We stood there on the mountainside, looking out over the valley below. From here, we could see the road that led back to civilization, currently buried under several feet of snow. It would be hours before we could hike down to where we'd left Ryan's car, and even then, we'd need to wait for the plows to clear the roads. But we'd survived. The cabin that everyone had doubted had kept us safe through the worst storm in decades. Ryan turned to me, his cheeks red from cold and exertion, his eyes bright. "I was thinking while we were digging." "Yeah." "About what happens next, when we get back to the real world." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see my breath mingling with his in the cold air. "I don't want to go back to how things were. I don't want to pretend anymore." "What do you want?" He smiled, nervous and hopeful at the same time. "I want to take you on a date, a real one. I want to figure out who I am and what I want without hiding from it. And I want to do that with you if you'll let me." My heart felt too big for my chest. Yeah, I'll let you." "It might be messy," he warned. "I'm probably going to be terrible at this at first. I might panic or overthink things or—" I cut him off by pulling him into a hug, wrapping my arms around him and holding tight. He melted into it, burying his face in my shoulder, and we stood like that in the snow, two figures silhouetted against the vast white landscape. "We'll figure it out," I murmured into his hair. "Together." The hike down the mountain took most of the day. We had to move slowly, carefully, taking turns breaking trail through the deep snow. But it felt different now. We moved in sync, helping each other over difficult patches, sharing water and the last of our snacks. And when we paused to rest, we stood closer than strictly necessary, shoulders touching, hands occasionally brushing. By the time we reached Ryan's car, the sun was setting, painting the snow in shades of pink and gold. We were exhausted, hungry, and probably mildly hypothermic, but we'd made it. We loaded our gear into the back and Ryan pulled out his phone, which had finally found signal. 53 missed calls," he said with a laugh. "My parents are going to kill me." "Mine too, probably." I checked my own phone, saw similar numbers. "We should call them, let them know we're okay." In a minute, Ryan set his phone down and turned to face me fully. "First, I want to do something." "What's that?" He reached up, cupped my face with both hands, and kissed me. It was gentle, questioning, nothing like the passionate kisses I'd imagined over the years. His lips were chapped from the cold, and he was trembling slightly, from cold or nerves or both, but it was perfect. It was real. It was finally happening. When he pulled back, his eyes were uncertain. Was that okay? I couldn't help but laugh, giddy and overwhelmed. "Yeah, Ryan, that was okay." "Good, because I've been wanting to do that since day 3. "Only day 3. He grinned, and it transformed his whole face. "Okay, fine. Maybe longer. Maybe since you first showed me the plans for this place and I saw how excited you were about it. Maybe since college, but I was too stupid to realize it. But definitely, consciously, since day 3 of being trapped in that cave with you." I kissed him again, deeper this time, pouring years of want and hope into it. He made a small sound against my mouth, and his hands tangled in my hair, and for a moment nothing else existed except this, us finally after all this time. When we broke apart, both breathing hard, the sun had almost finished setting. The world was turning purple and gold around us, and in the distance, I could hear the sound of snowplows finally making their way up the mountain road. "We should call our families," Ryan said reluctantly. "Yeah, we should." But neither of us moved to pick up our phones. Instead, we stood there in the fatting light, foreheads pressed together, both of us grinning like idiots. Hey, Marcus. Yeah. Your cave cabin isn't stupid. It's the best thing you ever built. I smiled against his skin. Pretty sure the best thing I ever built is whatever this is between us. That's incredibly cheesy. You kissed me first. You don't get to complain about cheese. He laughed, and the sound of it, joy, pure and uncomplicated, made everything we'd been through worth it. The years of hiding, the days of tension, the fear and uncertainty, all of it had led to this moment, standing in the snow with my best friend who was maybe becoming something more, and I'd never been more certain that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. We did eventually call our families, fielded their worried questions and relieved tears, promised to head straight to the hospital to get checked for frostbite or hypothermia. We'd spend the next several days answering questions from everyone who'd been worried, dealing with the aftermath of the worst storm in decades. But that night, after we'd been cleared by doctors and given warm meals and dry clothes, after we'd answered every question and assured everyone we were fine, Ryan came to my apartment instead of going home to his own. "Is this okay?" he asked at the door. "I don't want to assume." "It's okay," I said, pulling him inside. "It's more than okay." We ordered pizza, put on a movie neither of us paid attention to, and ended up on my couch tangled together in a way that was definitely not just friends. Every touch was deliberate now, intentional, charged with the knowledge that we were finally allowing ourselves to feel what had been there all along. "I'm going to need time," Ryan said at some point, his head on my chest, my fingers running through his hair, "to figure out everything this means, to understand parts of myself I've been avoiding. I know, and it might be hard sometimes. I might freak out or doubt myself or—" "Ryan," I tilted his face up to look at me. "I waited years to tell you how I feel. I can wait while you figure yourself out. We'll go at whatever pace you need." He smiled, soft and vulnerable. "What did I do to deserve you?" "Pretty sure I'm the lucky one here." "No, I'm serious." He sat up slightly, meeting my eyes. "You've been patient with me, honest with me, even when it would have been easier to just let things stay the way they were. You built a literal cave cabin because you wanted somewhere that felt like it could be ours. You're God, Marcus. You're kind of amazing, and I'm sorry it took me this long to see it." I pulled him back down, held him close, and let myself feel the full weight of this moment. After years of wanting, years of hiding, years of convincing myself that friendship would be enough, this was real. He was here in my arms, choosing this, choosing us, even with all the uncertainty that came with it. "So what happens now?" Ryan asked sleepily. "Now we take it one day at a time. We go on that date you promised me. We figure out what this is and what it means. And we do it together." "Together," he echoed, and I felt him smile against my chest. Outside, the city was slowly digging itself out from the blizzard. But inside my apartment, wrapped up in each other, we were building something new. Something that everyone had doubted was possible, just like they doubted my cave cabin. And just like the cabin, we'd prove them wrong. 6 months later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the cabin, and I woke to find Ryan already awake, watching me with a soft smile on his face. We'd come back up for the first time since the blizzard, and this time there was no storm forecast, just a perfect June weekend in the mountains. "Morning," he said, leaning over to kiss me. "Morning." I stretched, noticed his sketchbook open beside him. "What are you working on?" "Plans." He turned the book so I could see. "I was thinking, if you're interested, we could expand the cabin. Add a second room, maybe a better kitchen area. Make it a real weekend place instead of just a survival shelter." I sat up, took the book from him, studied his careful drawings. They were good. Ryan had always been artistic, even though he'd never pursued it professionally. But more than that, they showed a vision of this place that matched my own. A space that was ours, built together. "You want to build this with me?" I asked. "If you'll have me as a construction partner. I'm not exactly skilled labor." "I'll teach you." I set the sketchbook aside, pulled him close. "I'll teach you everything." He kissed me again, deeper this time, and I could feel the certainty in it. The 6 months since the blizzard hadn't been perfect. Ryan had indeed panicked a few times, had struggled with internalized fears and expectations. There had been hard conversations, moments of doubt, times when I'd worried we were moving too fast or not fast enough. But we'd figured it out, together. He'd come out to his family 3 months ago, and while it had been difficult, they'd ultimately been supportive. He'd started seeing a therapist to work through years of repressed feelings. He'd broken his lease and moved into my apartment, and every day I got to wake up next to him felt like a gift. "I love you," Ryan said against my lips, "in case I haven't said it recently." "You said it this morning, and last night, and approximately 47 times yesterday." "Well, I'm saying it again. I love you, Marcus Chen. I love your terrible engineering jokes. I love the way you plan everything to death. I love that you built a cave cabin that saved our lives. I love that you waited for me to figure myself out. I love everything about you." My eyes stung. "I love you too, even though you're absolutely a disaster in the workshop." He laughed. "That's fair." We spent that weekend making plans for the cabin expansion, talking about the future, existing in the space we'd created together. And when we hiked down on Sunday evening, it was with the knowledge that we'd be back, again and again, building something permanent in the place where everything had changed. The cave cabin that everyone had doubted had become the foundation of our life together. And I couldn't help but think that sometimes the best things, the things worth building, worth waiting for, worth risking everything for, are exactly the things that everyone tells you are impossible. You just have to be brave enough to build them anyway. Thank you for reading this story. If you enjoyed following Marcus and Ryan's journey from best friends to something more, please subscribe for more emotional, slow-burn LGBTQ plus romantic stories. Hit that like button if this story touched your heart and comment below. I'd love to know. What was your favorite moment between Marcus and Ryan? Should I tell you what happened when they finished building the cabin expansion and Ryan had a surprise plan for Marcus? Let me know if you want part 2.